everybody. I am so excited to read our next chapter, chapter 14. This one is called Dr. Dorian. Remember, we heard about Dr. Dorian earlier in the book. He was Fern's doctor, and Fern's mom was talking to her dad about going to see Dr. Dorian. The next day was Saturday. Fern stood at the kitchen sink, drying the breakfast dishes as her mother washed them. Mrs. Arable worked silently. She hoped Fern would go out and play with some other children instead of heading for the Zuckerman's barn to sit and watch the animals. Charlotte is the best storyteller I ever heard, said Fern, poking her dish towel into a cereal bowl. Fern, said her mother sternly, you must not invent things. You know spiders don't tell stories. Spiders can't talk. Has that ever happened to you? Why did Mrs. Arable think that Fern was inventing, and what did she mean by inventing? Has that ever happened to you where you heard something or saw something and an adult didn't believe you when you told them? Charlotte can, replied Fern. She doesn't talk very loud, but she talks. What kind of story did she tell? Asked Mrs. Arable. Well, began Fern, she told us about a cousin of hers who caught a fish in her web. Don't you think that's fascinating? Fern, dear, now how would a fish get caught in a spider's web, said Mrs. Arable. You know that couldn't happen. You're just making this up. Oh, it happened all right, replied Fern. Charlotte never fibs. This cousin of hers built a web across a stream. One day she was hanging around on the web and a tiny fish leaped into the air and got tangled in the web. The fish was caught by one fin, Mother. Its tail was thrashing wildly and shining in the sun. Can't you just see the web sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish? Charlotte's cousin kept slipping in and dodging out and was beaten mercilessly over the head by the wildly thrashing fish, dancing in and dancing out, throwing... Fern, snapped her mother, stop it. Stop inventing these wild tales. I'm not inventing, said Fern. I'm telling you the facts. What finally happened? Asked her mother, whose curiosity began to get the better of her. Well, Charlotte's cousin won. She wrapped the fish up and then she ate him when she got good and ready. Spiders have to eat, same as the rest of us. Yes, I suppose they do, said Mrs. Arable vaguely. Charlotte has another cousin who is a balloonist. She stands on her head and lets out a lot of line and is carried aloft on the wind. Mother, wouldn't you simply love to do that? Well, yes, I would, come to think of it, replied Mrs. Arable. But, Fern, darling, I wish you would play outdoors today instead of going to Uncle Homer's barn. Find some of your playmates and do something nice outdoors. You're spending too much time in that barn. It isn't good for you to be alone so much. Alone, said Fern. Alone? My best friends are in the barn cellar. It's a very sociable place, not at all lonely. Fern disappeared after a while, walking down the road towards the Zuckermans. Her mother dusted the sitting room, and as she worked, she kept thinking about Fern. It just didn't seem natural for a little girl to be so interested in animals. Finally, Mrs. Arable made up her mind to pay a call on old Dr. Dorian and ask his advice. She got in the car and she drove to his office in the village. Dr. Dorian had a thick beard. He was glad to see Mrs. Arable and he gave her a comfortable chair. It's about Fern, she explained. Fern spends entirely too much time in the Zuckerman's barn. It doesn't seem normal. She sits on a milk stool in a corner of the barn cellar near the pig pen and watches animals hour after hour. She just sits and listens. Dr. Dorian leaned back and closed his eyes. How enchanting, he said. It must be really nice and quiet down there. Homer has some sheep, doesn't he? Yes, said Mrs. Arable, but it all started with that pig that we let Fern raise on a bottle. She calls him Wilbur. Homer bought the pig, and ever since it left our place, Fern has been going to her uncle's to be near it. I've been hearing things about that pig, said Dr. Dorian, opening his eyes. They say he's quite a pig. Have you heard about the words that appear in the spider's web? Asked Mrs. Arable nervously. Yes, replied the doctor. Well, do you understand it? Asked Mrs. Arable. Understand what? Do you understand how there could be any writing in a spider's web? Oh no, said Dr. Dorian, I don't understand it. But for that matter, I don't understand how a spider learned how to spin a web in the first place. When the words appeared, everyone said they were a miracle. But nobody pointed out that the web itself is a miracle. You think that? Have you ever thought about that? That how a spider makes a web is just a miracle? What's so miraculous about a spider's web, said Mrs. Arable. I don't see why you say a web is a miracle. It's just a web. Have you ever tried to spin one? Asked Dr. Dorian. Mrs. Arable shifted uneasily in her chair. No, she said, but I can crochet a doily and I can knit socks. Sure, said the doctor. But somebody taught you, didn't they? So here's Mrs. Arable and Dr. Dorian having their conversation. Look at Dr. Dorian. He doesn't look very worried about anything, does he? Fern's mom looks worried, though. My mother taught me. Okay, well, who taught a spider? A young spider knows how to spin a web without any instructions from anybody. Don't you regard that as a miracle? Oh, I suppose so, said Mrs. Arable. I never looked at it that way before. Still, I don't understand how those words got into the web. I don't understand it, and I don't like what I don't understand. I think that's a problem a lot of us have. We just don't like things we don't understand. None of us do, said Dr. Dorian, sighing. I'm a doctor. Doctors are supposed to understand everything. But I don't understand everything, and I don't intend to let it worry me. Mrs. Arable fidgeted. Fern says that the animals talk to each other. Dr. Dorian, do you think animals talk? How about you? Do you think animals can talk? Well, I never heard one say anything, he replied, but that doesn't prove anything. It's quite possible that an animal has spoken civilly to me and I didn't catch the remark because I wasn't paying attention. Children pay better attention than grown-ups. If Fern says the animals in Zuckerman's barn are talking, I'm quite ready to believe her. Perhaps if people talked less, animals might talk more. People are incessant talkers. I can give you my word on that. What do you think about that? Do you think if we talked less, animals would talk more? Well, I do feel better about Fern, said Mrs. Arable. So you don't think I need to worry about her? Does she look well? Asked the doctor. Oh, yes. Is her appetite good? Oh, yes, she's always hungry. Does she sleep well at night? Oh, yes. Then don't worry, said the doctor. Do you think she'll ever start thinking about something besides pig and sheep and geese and spiders? How old is Fern? She's 8. Well, said Dr. Dorian, I think she will always love animals, but I doubt that she spends her entire life in Homer Zuckerman's barn cellar. How about boys? Does she know any boys? She knows Henry Fussy, said Mrs. Arable brightly. Dr. Dorian closed his eyes again and went into deep thought. Henry Fussy, he mumbled. Remarkable. Well, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Let Fern associate with her friends in the barn if she wants to. I would say offhand that spiders and pigs are fully as interesting as Henry Fussy. Yet I predict that the day will come and when even Henry will drop some chance remark that catches Fern's attention. It's amazing how children change from year to year. How's Avery? He asked, his eyes opening wide. Oh, Avery, chuckled Mrs. Arable. Avery's always fine. Of course, he gets into poison ivy and gets stung by wasps and bees, and he brings frogs and snakes home and breaks everything he lays his hands on. He's fine. Good, said the doctor. Mrs. Arable said goodbye and thanked Dr. Dorian very much for his advice, and she felt greatly relieved. So she had to go see the doctor because she was worried about Fern, but what did the doctor end up saying? Nothing really to worry about. Fern's going to be okay. Have a great day, and I will see you next time.